The morning sky of Zellar Prime had always been a beautiful shade of blue, like the ocean waves that crashed against the crystal shores of their peaceful world. But today, that sky burned orange with fire and smoke as massive alien warships tore through the atmosphere like angry metal beasts. Elder scientist Kirave pressed her for trembling hands against the observation window of the Planetary Defense Center, watching helplessly as explosions bloomed across her world's surface. Her people had no weapons, no armies, no way to fight back. They were scholars, artists, healers, not warriors. "This cannot be happening," she whispered, her voice breaking. For over 1,000 years, the Zellaria had lived in peace, believing the ancient stories that powerful guardians watched over their sector of space. Those stories seemed like fairy tales now. The communication center behind her buzzed with panicked voices. Young technicians ran between control panels, their faces pale with terror as they reported the same devastating news over and over. The Cathiran war fleet was demanding complete surrender. Elder Kirava called out her assistant, Velra, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "The Kithrans are broadcasting on all frequencies. They want our submission in 1 hour, or they will. They will destroy our cities one by one." Kirava closed her large amber eyes and took a deep breath. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she remembered the old stories her grandmother used to tell, tales of mighty protectors who had once saved entire worlds from destruction. Most Zelari considered them myths, but the ancient protocols were still there, buried deep in their oldest computer systems. "Velra," she said quietly, "activate the emergency beacon." "Elder, those systems haven't been used in 3,000 years. We don't even know if do it," she snapped, surprising herself with the force in her voice. "If there's even a chance, we have to try." With shaking hands, she moved to the ancient communication array, a massive device that took up half the room, covered in symbols that most modern Zalari couldn't even read. As her fingers traced the complex patterns, she felt a strange sense of destiny, as if her entire life had led to this moment. The machine hummed to life, its crystalline components glowing with ethereal light. "Great protectors," she whispered. "Into the transmitter if you still exist somewhere in the void. Your children call to you. We are dying, please. If there is any mercy left in this galaxy, come to our aid." The message launched into space at faster than light speed, carrying with it the hopes and prayers of billions of innocent souls, 47 light-years away. In the depths of space, where stars looked like scattered diamonds against black velvet, the United Earth ship Thunderbolt cruised through the cosmos. Captain Minho Park stood on the bridge, a cup of coffee in his hand, as he watched his crew conduct their routine exercises at 28 years old. For a starship captain, but he'd earned his position through skill and dedication. His dark hair was neatly combed, his uniform crisp, and his eyes held the kind of steady confidence that made his crew feel safe, even in the dangerous unknown of deep space. The third human expeditionary fleet consisted of 12 ships, not the largest force humanity had ever assembled, but modern and well-equipped. They were explorers first, diplomats second, and warriors only when absolutely necessary. "Captain," called Communications Officer Yuna Kim from her station, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm picking up something strange. It's old. Really old." Minho set down his coffee and walked over to her console. Yuna was barely 25, fresh out of the academy, but she had an ear for alien communications that impressed even veteran officers. "What kind of old?" he asked. "The signal pattern dates back thousands of years, but it just transmitted. It's like someone found an ancient radio and started broadcasting with it." She adjusted her headset, listening intently. "Sir, I think someone's asking for help." The bridge fell silent as Yuna played the translated message through the speakers. The alien voice was filled with such raw desperation that it made everyone stop what they were doing. Even Lieutenant Jaeon Woo at the weapons console looked up from his tactical displays. "They're calling for something called the Protector Fleet," Yuna continued, her voice soft with sympathy. "According to their message, these protectors were legendary guardians who defended this region of space millennia ago." Minho felt a chill run down his spine. "And they think we're these protectors." "It's possible, sir. The transmission was sent. On a broad spectrum, hoping anyone would pick it up. The captain stared at the star chart, his mind racing. Humanity had only been exploring deep space for 50 years. They'd encountered other species before, some friendly, some hostile, most simply indifferent. But they'd never been mistaken for legendary saviors. "Sir," Eunice said quietly, "there's more. I'm detecting weapon signatures in that system. Big ones. And the aliens sending the distress call. They don't have any military vessels. None at all." The bridge communications suddenly crackled to life as Admiral Jiwan Lee's voice came through from the flagship Liberty. At 45, Admiral Lee was a veteran of humanity's first contact wars. A woman who'd seen too much death but never stopped believing in doing what was right. "All ships, this is Admiral Lee. We've all received the same transmission.
Long range.
Sensors confirm hostile activity in the Zalari system. Preliminary analysis suggests a technologically inferior species is being attacked by a much more advanced force." Minho exchanged glances with his bridge crew. They all knew what this meant. "Question before us," Admiral Lee continued, "is simple. Do we intervene in a conflict that isn't ours? To save people who think we're something we're not?" The bridge fell silent. Through the view screen, Minho could see the other ships of the fleet, their running lights twinkling like fireflies in the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were dying while calling for help from legends that didn't exist. "All ships," Admiral Lee's voice came again, but this time it carried the steel of absolute determination. "Prepare for emergency hyperspace jump. We may not be the protectors these people are looking for, but we're what they've got. And sometimes, that has to be enough." Engineering Officer Dong Yuk SEO looked up from his console, excitement and nervousness mixing in his voice. "Sir, hyperspace engines are spinning up. We'll be ready to jump in 5 minutes." Minho nodded, feeling the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. In a few minutes, they would leap across space to answer a call meant for heroes of legend. They weren't those heroes, but they were human, and humans had a long history of showing up when others needed help the most. "All hands prepare for combat operations," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We're going to make some new friends today." The fabric of space itself seemed to tear apart as 12 human warships burst out of hyperspace in a brilliant flash of blue light. Captain Minho Park gripped his command chair as the Thunderbolt shuddered from the violent transition back to normal space. "Status report," he called out, his eyes immediately focusing on the main view screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. Zalari Prime hung before them like a wounded jewel, its beautiful blue oceans now reflecting the orange glow of fires burning across entire continents. Massive alien warships, ugly, brutish things that looked more like flying fortresses than spacecraft, hung in orbit like vultures, raining destruction down on the helpless world below. "Jesus," whispered Lieutenant Jaeon Woo from the weapons console. "They're bombarding civilian targets." The Kithran ships were nothing, like the sleek, elegant vessels in the human fleet, where human ships curved gracefully through space like dolphins through water. These alien warships were all sharp angles and brutal efficiency. They looked like they'd been built by someone who thought fear was more important than beauty. 37. Enemy contacts, reported Chief Tactical Officer Soyeon Nam, her fingers flying over her console as data streamed across multiple screens. "Mass readings suggest they're much larger than our ships, but their technology. ... double quotes." She paused, frowning. "Admiral, their shields are primitive. Their weapons are powerful but slow to recharge. It's like they're still using technology from centuries ago." On the command deck of the flagship Liberty, Admiral Giwan Lee studied the tactical display with the experienced eye of someone who'd been in more space battles than she cared to remember. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her weathered face showed the kind of calm that only came from years of making life-and-death decisions. "They're not expecting resistance," she murmured to her aide. "Look at their formation. They're spread out for maximum bombardment coverage, not combat. They think this is going to be a slaughter." Suddenly, Communications Officer Ji-hoon Choi looked up from his station aboard the Thunderbolt, his young face pale with excitement. "Captain, we're being hailed. It's coming from the planet's surface." Put it through, Minho ordered. The main screen flickered. And suddenly, they were looking at a face that was clearly not human. The being had smooth, pearl-colored skin that seemed to shimmer in the light, with large, expressive eyes that held depths of intelligence and, right now, desperate hope. 4 slender arms gestured gracefully as she spoke, and when she smiled, it was with genuine warmth despite her obvious fear. "Great protectors," the alien said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made everyone on the bridge lean forward. "You have returned to us in our darkest hour. I am Elder Scientist Kira Ave of the Zelari people. We are your faithful servants." Minho felt his heart skip a beat. They really did think the human fleet was these legendary protectors. He glanced toward his communications panel, knowing that Admiral Lee was watching the same transmission on her flagship. Admiral Lee's voice came through on a private channel, speaking directly to her captains. "They think we're their ancient guardians. We can either correct them and possibly shatter their hope, or ... double quotes." She paused. "We play along and try to save their world." It wasn't really a choice. Minho had joined the space service to explore and protect, not to stand by while innocents died. Admiral Lee appeared on the alien's screen, her expression carefully neutral. "We ... have come as requested," she said, choosing her words with the skill of a diplomat. "Identify your attackers." "The Kithrin Empire." Kira's voice filled with anger and fear. "Their war leader Vexstar appeared in our system 3 days ago, demanding our complete surrender. They want to enslave our people, steal our resources, destroy our culture. When we refused to submit, they began the bombardment." On cue, another explosion bloomed on the planet's surface, visible even from orbit. Minho clenched his fists, feeling rage building in his chest. "Not on our watch," Soin muttered from her tactical station, echoing what everyone on the bridge was thinking. She turned to address the Admiral's image on her screen. "Ma'am, I'm reading their weapon signatures. These Kithrins are using brute force tactics, massive energy cannons, heavy plasma bombardment, shock, and awe. But their targeting systems are slow, their ships are sluggish, and their formation shows no tactical awareness whatsoever." Admiral Lee nodded grimly. "They're used to fighting enemies who can't fight back effectively. All ships, this is Admiral Lee. We're going to show these bullies what happens when they pick on someone who has friends in high places." The transformation that swept through the human fleet was like watching a sleeping tiger wake up. Ships that had been cruising in exploration formation suddenly shifted into combat patterns that had been drilled into their crews through countless training exercises. Weapon systems that had been powered down hummed to life. Fighters began launching from carrier bays, and shields strengthened to full combat strength. *** flight leader Hyunjung *** settled into the cockpit of his fighter, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came before combat. At 26, he was one of the youngest squadron leaders in the fleet. But his reflexes were lightning fast, and his tactical awareness was legendary among the pilots. "Alpha Squadron, this is Tiger-led." He spoke into his cum as his fighter screamed out of the carrier bay. "We're going in fast and hard. These alien ships are big and slow. Use that against them. Hit and run people. Make them dizzy." Behind him, 11 other fighters formed up in perfect formation, their sleek hulls gleaming in the light of Zalari's sun. They looked like metal arrows compared to the massive Kithrin warships, but arrows could kill giants if aimed properly. The Kithrin fleet was so focused on their bombardment that they didn't notice the small human fighters until it was too late. Hyon led his squadron in a diving attack that came out of the sun, using the star's glare to mask their approach. "Target their shield generators," he called out as his targeting computer locked onto the massive enemy flagship. Fox 3. Yes. Missiles away. The plasma torpedoes that streaked from the human fighters were smaller than the massive energy bolts the Kithrins were used to. But they were guided by computer systems that could calculate trajectories and intercept courses faster than any organic brain. They struck the alien shields at precisely the right frequency to cause maximum disruption. The Kithrin flagship Bone Crusher shuddered under the impact, its crude shields flickering as overloaded power systems struggled to compensate. War leader Vexstar stumbled on his command deck, his reptilian features twisted with confusion and rage. "What was that?" he roared at his subordinates. "Are the Zelari fighting back?" "No, my lord," stammered his sensor operator. "The attacks came from ... from the unknown ships that just arrived." But the human attack was just beginning. While the fighters kept the Kitharin point defense systems busy, the main human fleet moved into attack formation. The Thunderbolt and her sister ships might have been smaller than the alien vessels, but they moved with the grace and precision of a pack of wolves hunting mammoth. Captain Minho watched as his tactical officer, Doyen, coordinated the fleet's attack with the cold efficiency of a master chess player. "Target their weapons systems," she ordered. "Take away their ability to hurt the planet." The human ships opened fire with weapons that the Kitharans had never seen before, focused particle beams that could punch through armor like needles through cloth, electromagnetic pulse torpedoes that shut down enemy systems without destroying the ships entirely, and most confusing of all, weapons that seemed to adapt their frequency and power output in real time. Within the first hour of battle, Kitharan ships had been either destroyed or disabled. The remaining enemy vessels, designed for attacking defenseless worlds rather than fighting actual military opponents, began to retreat in confusion and growing panic. War leader Vexstar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Fleet, which had conquered a dozen worlds in the past year, was being torn apart by ships half their size. "Impossible," he snarled. "Who are these enemies?" On Zelari Prime, the celebration had already begun. In the capital city, millions of Zalar poured into the streets, their musical voices raised in songs of joy and gratitude. Elder scientist Kira Vess stood on her observation deck, tears of relief streaming down her face as she watched the human ships chase away the invaders. "The protectors have returned," she whispered to herself. The legends were true. But in the depths of space, Admiral Lee knew that this victory was only the beginning. The Kitharans would be back, probably with reinforcements, and when they returned, it would be ready for a real fight. War leader Vexstar's claws scraped against the metal floor of his command deck as he paced back and forth like a caged predator. His reptilian features were twisted with fury, his yellow eyes burning with hatred. The Bone Crusher had been his pride, a massive dreadnought that had brought terror to dozens of worlds. Now it bore scorch marks and hull breaches from the humiliating defeat 3 days ago. 50 ships, he growled to himself, watching through the viewport as more Kitharan vessels dropped out of hyperspace. Each one was a monument to his empire's philosophy of warfare. Bigger, heavier, more brutal than anything most civilizations could field. They embarrassed us with 12 pathetic vessels. Now we'll crush them with an armada. His aide, intelligence, Master Kelvar, approached cautiously. The smaller Kitharan scales were pale with fear, not of the enemy, but of his own commander's rage. "My lord, our analysis of the captured data is complete. These are not the protectors of ancient legend." Vexstar whirled around, his massive frame towering over his subordinate. "Explain." "They call themselves humans, my lord. Previously unknown species from the outer spiral arm. Our databases have no record of them. They appear to be explorers, not warriors." "Explorers?" Vexstar's voice dripped with contempt. "Explorers do not destroy 8 of my ships in a single engagement. That's what troubles me, my lord. Their technology is ... different, where we build for power and intimidation. They build for efficiency and adaptability. Their ships are smaller but faster. Their weapons are weaker, but more precise. It's as if they fight an entirely different kind of war." Vexstar slammed his fist against the command console, causing several junior officers to flinch. "There is only one kind of war, the kind where the strongest survive and the weak are crushed. Ready all weapons. This time, we will show no mercy." Meanwhile, millions of miles away aboard the human flagship Liberty, the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of rage and brutality, there was calm, focused analysis. Admiral Giwan Lee stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing every detail of the approaching Kitharan fleet. Commander Taeyong-o stood at attention before her, a special operations team arrayed behind him. At 32, Taeyong was a veteran of humanity's conflicts with hostile alien species. But he'd never faced anything quite like this, an enemy that seemed to rely entirely on brute force and intimidation. "Tell me what we've learned," Admiral Lee said quietly. Taeyong activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of a Kithran ship. 3 days of studying their technology, psychology, and tactics has revealed some interesting patterns, ma'am. Their entire military doctrine is built around overwhelming force and fear. They're used to enemies who surrender at the first sign of superior firepower. He gestured to another display showing intercepted Kithran communications. Their command structure is rigidly hierarchical. Orders flow down from the top, but there's no flexibility for field commanders to adapt. When something goes wrong, they wait for new orders instead of improvising. Sergeant Narration stepped forward, her combat armor gleaming under the war room's lights. She was small compared to her male colleagues, but her reputation for getting impossible missions done was legendary throughout the fleet. "Sir, what's the plan?" 50 ships is a lot, even for us." Taeyong smiled grimly. "We're going to do what humans do best, Sergeant. We're going to fight smart instead of strong. Operation Ghost Strike begins in 1 hour, in the depths of space." 3 human stealth ships moved like shadows between the stars. The Whisper, Shadow, and Phantom were marvels of human engineering vessels designed to be invisible to sensors. It's undetectable by most scanning methods, and fast enough to slip in and out of enemy formations before anyone knew they were. There Nari floated in the zero-gravity equipment bay of the Whisper, checking her gear one final time. Her team consisted of 6 specialists: Corporal Jinwoo Han, an expert in alien computer systems; Private Suyang Park, a demolition specialist who could make a bomb out of spare parts; and 3 others who'd trained for years in the art of silent warfare. "Remember," Nari spoke into her helmet, "come, we're not here to fight. We're here to cause chaos. Get in, plant the viruses, sabotage what we can, and get out. Let the enemy destroy themselves." The stealth ships approached the Kithran fleet under cover of the system's asteroid field. The alien sensors, designed to detect large threats, completely missed the small human vessels as they slipped between the massive enemy ships. Like fish swimming between whales, Corporal Jinwoo Han studied his scanner as they approached. Their target, a heavy cruiser called Blood Drinker. "Their security is a joke," he whispered. "It's like they've never heard of cyber warfare. The boarding operation was flawless. It's using magnetic grapples and microthrusters. The human commandos attached themselves to the alien hull and cut through with plasma torches. The Kithrans inside never knew they'd been boarded. Moving through the enemy ship's corridors, the humans were amazed by what they saw. Everything was built for intimidation rather than efficiency. Walls covered with spikes and threatening symbols. Lighting that cast ominous shadows. Even the architecture seemed designed to inspire fear. "These guys are seriously overcompensating," muttered Private Suyang Park, as she planted explosive charges on key support beams. Meanwhile, Jinwoo had reached the ship's main computer core. Kithran computer systems were primitive. By human standards, powerful but crude. With security that relied on passwords and physical locks rather than sophisticated encryption. "It's like hacking a computer from the Stone Age," he said to himself, as his fingers flew over his portable terminal. The virus he uploaded was a masterpiece of human programming, adaptive code that would spread through the enemy network, causing systems to malfunction at precisely the wrong moments. When the main battle began 6 hours later, the Kithran fleet advanced in perfect formation, their 50 ships arranged in a classic Hammerandonville pattern designed to crush the human fleet through sheer overwhelming force. War leader Vexstar stood on his command deck, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. Today, these humans learn what happens when they dare to oppose the Kithran Empire. But as his fleet moved into attack position, things began to go wrong. The cruiser Blood Drinker suddenly veered out of formation, its navigation systems showing random coordinates. The battleship Worldender opened fire on empty space, its targeting computers convinced they were under attack by invisible enemies. "What is happening?" Vexstar roared, as chaos erupted throughout his fleet. I don't know, my lord. His sensor operator replied, panic creeping into his voice. Ships are reporting system failures across the board. Navigation, weapons, communications, everything is malfunctioning. On the bridge of the Thunderbolt, Captain Minho Park watched the enemy fleet tear itself apart with a mixture of admiration and amazement. Remind me never to make Tae-young's team angry, said to his tactical officer. Chief Tactical Officer. Soy and Nam smiled as she coordinated the human fleet's response. Human Tactics 101, sir? When you can't outgun them, outthink them? The human ships moved through the confused Kithran formation like dancers, their weapons picking off disabled vessels with surgical precision. Fighter pilot Seojin Kong led his squadron in diving attacks that exploited every weakness the sabotage had created. Blue leader to all fighters. Seojin called out as his squadron dove toward a Kithran destroyer whose shields were flickering on and off randomly. Their defenses are down. Pick your targets and make every shot count. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Kithrans, who had expected a brutal slugging match where the biggest guns would win, found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Human ships appeared where they weren't expected, struck at precisely the right moment, and vanished before the enemy could respond. Asterisk, asterisk, War Leader Vexstar, asterisk watched in growing horror. As his mighty fleet was systematically dismantled by an enemy half their size, ships collided with each other as their navigation systems failed, weapons fired at their own allies due to corrupted targeting data, and entire vessels went dark as their power systems overloaded. This is impossible, he snarled as clawed, hands gripping the command console so tightly that the metal began to bend. We have 50 ships. They have 12. But the humans weren't fighting with 50 ships against 12. They were fighting smart against stupid, flexible against rigid, innovation against tradition. And in that kind of fight, numbers didn't matter nearly as much as the Kithrans thought they did, as the last of his fleet either fled or exploded. Vexstar realized he was facing something he'd never encountered before, an enemy that didn't just fight to win, but fought to teach a lesson. And the lesson was simple. In the vast darkness of space, intelligence and adaptability would always triumph over brute force and intimidation. The age of the Kithran Empire's easy conquests was over. The humans had arrived, and they were about to change everything. The mission should have been simple. Slip onto the Kithran supply ship, plant the explosives, and get out before anyone noticed. Corporal Mingiru had done dozens of similar operations, her small frame and quick reflexes making her perfect for stealth missions. But this time something went terribly wrong. It started when the enemy ship's patrol schedule changed, unexpectedly, as Minji crept through the dark corridors of the alien vessel, her advanced suit keeping her nearly invisible to their primitive sensors. She heard the heavy footsteps of Kithran guards approaching from both directions. Damn, she whispered into her cum, pressing herself against the cold metal wall. The corridor was too long to reach cover, and her exit route was now blocked by 6-foot-tall reptilian warriors carrying energy weapons that could vaporize her. In seconds, Sergeant Narishin's voice crackled through her earpiece from the extraction ship. Minji, what's your status? You're supposed to be at the rendezvous point. I'm pinned down, Minji replied, checking her weapons charge. They changed their patrol routes. I think someone's getting suspicious. The Kithran guards rounded the corner before she could find another hiding spot. For a moment, they stared at each other in surprise. The aliens had never seen anything like her advanced stealth suit, while Minji found herself face to face with creatures that looked like walking nightmares. The firefight was brief but vicious. Mingi's plasma rifle was more advanced than anything the Kithrans carried, but she was outnumbered 6-1. She managed to take down 3 of them before a stunning blast from behind knocked her unconscious. When she woke up, was strapped to a metal chair in what looked like a torture chamber. The walls were covered with instruments that seemed designed more to intimidate than to actually extract information. Typical. Kithran psychology, War Leader Vexstar stood before her, his massive frame casting a shadow across the room. His yellow eyes studied her with the cold interest of a scientist examining a new specimen. "So," he said, his voice like grinding stones, "you are one of these mysterious protectors. You are smaller than I expected." Minji said nothing, focusing. On her training? Name, rank, serial number? That was all she was required to give. "Her silence will not protect you," Vexstar continued. "We have ways of making even the strongest warriors talk." But the Kithrans had made a crucial mistake. They assumed that because they used fear and pain to control their own people, the same methods would work on everyone. They didn't understand that humans had spent centuries developing ways to resist torture, to protect information even under the most extreme circumstances. Hours passed. The Kithran interrogators tried everything: pain inducers, fear toxins, psychological manipulation. Nothing worked. Minji endured it all with the stoic determination that had made humanity feared across the galaxy. It was only when they threatened to execute captured Zalari civilians that her resolve finally cracked. "Wait," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of silence. "Don't hurt them. They're innocent." Star leaned forward, sensing victory. "Then you will answer my questions." Slowly, piece by piece, the truth came out. The humans weren't the ancient protectors. They were explorers from a distant star system, a young civilization that had only been traveling between the stars for a few decades. They had no special connection to this region of space, no ancient obligation to defend it. They had come simply because someone had asked for help. The revelation spread through both fleets like a virus in a computer network. On the Kithran ships, there was confusion and then growing confidence. If these weren't legendary guardians, then they were just another primitive species to be conquered. But on Zelari Prime, the reaction was very different. In the capital cities, Main Plaza, millions of Zelari had gathered to watch the battle on massive public screens. When the news broke, the celebratory atmosphere turned to panic in seconds. "They're not the protectors," someone screamed. "We're doomed." Elder scientist Kira Vess stood on her observation deck, watching as her people's hope crumbled before her eyes. Families hugged each other in the streets, certain that death was coming. The beautiful singing that had filled the air during their celebration was replaced by wails of despair. Vexstar, monitoring the planet's communications from his flagship, saw his opportunity. He activated the broadcast system, sending his image to every screen on Zelari Prime and every ship in both fleets. "Zelari fools," he snarled, his reptilian features twisted with cruel satisfaction. "Your so-called protectors are frauds. They are nothing but primitive explorers who stumbled into something far beyond their capability. Surrender now, renounce these false saviors, and we will show mercy to those who submit willingly." On the human ships, the mood was grim. The crew, members who had felt like heroes just hours before, now questioned everything. Were they really making a difference, or were they just prolonging the inevitable? Captain Minho Park stood on the bridge of the Thunderbolt, watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. His officers looked to him for guidance, but what could he say? Everything Vexstar had claimed was true. They weren't legendary guardians, just people who had tried to do the right thing. But then he thought about Minji, alone in enemy hands, probably being tortured for information. He thought about the Zelari civilians huddled in their cities, waiting for death to rain from the sky. He thought about his crew who had risked everything to answer a desperate call for help. "Open a channel," he said quietly to Communications Officer Yuna Kim. "All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this." Yuna's fingers flew over her console. "Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to both fleets and the planet." Minho stepped forward, and suddenly his image appeared on screens throughout the star system. He wasn't particularly impressive to look at. Just a young human officer in a simple uniform, no different from thousands of others. But when he spoke, his voice carried a strength that made everyone listen. "People of Zelari, warriors of Cathara, hear me," he began, his words echoing across space. "You're right. We are not your ancient protectors. We're humans, and we come from a young civilization far from here. Our ships aren't legendary vessels of power, and we're not mythical guardians sent by the gods." He paused, letting that sink in, "But we heard your call for help. And we came because that's what we do. We don't protect because we're programmed to, or because of some ancient duty carved in stone. We protect because, when someone calls for help, decent people answer. The bridge was silent as he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. We've traveled thousands of light years, not for glory or conquest, not because we expect reward or worship, but because it was the right thing to do. That's what makes us human. Not our technology, not our weapons, not our ships. It's our choice to stand between innocent people and those who would harm them. On Zellery Prime, the panic began to subside. People stopped running and started listening. This wasn't the voice of a mythical protector speaking from legend. This was the voice of someone real, someone who had chosen to help them not because he had to, but because he wanted to. In the human fleet, crew members stood straighter. They remembered why they had joined the space service, why they had left the safety of Earth to explore the dangerous unknown. It wasn't for glory, it was to make a difference. Even some of the Kithrin crews found themselves listening, confused by this strange concept of helping others without expecting anything in return. But Vextar was having none of it. Wordy words. He snarled over the communication channel, his voice dripping with contempt. Let us see how your righteousness fares against real power. I've already called for the Grand Fleet, 3 full battle groups, over 200 ships of the line. Your pathetic dozen vessels will be nothing but space dust. On the bridge of the Thunderbolt, Lieutenant Sun Wubei looked up from his sensor station, his face pale with concern. Captain, I'm detecting massive hyperspace signatures, multiple contact groups, incoming fast. Admiral Juan Li's voice came over the fleetcommunicationsystem.com, but tense. All ships, long-range sensors, confirm enemy reinforcements. Estimated strength, 200-plus vessels. Time to contact, 6 hours. Minho looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They knew the odds they were facing. 200 ships. Against 12 was impossible by any reasonable calculation, but none of them suggested retreat. Well, said Chief Tactical Officer Soyan Nam with a grim smile, I guess we're about to find out what 12 determined humans can do against an empire. Outside the viewports, space itself seemed to hold its breath as both sides prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of billions. The humans weren't legendary protectors, but they were about to prove that sometimes. Being human was enough. Space itself seemed to tear apart as the Kithrin Grand Fleet emerged. From hyperspace, like an avalanche of metal and death, 200 warships materialized in perfect formation, each one bristling with enough firepower to level a moon. At their center loomed the Worldbreaker, a massive dreadnought that was less a ship and more a flying fortress. Its hull scarred. From 100 conquered worlds, Supreme War Leader Kexvin stood on the bridge of his flagship, his massive 8-foot frame encased in ceremonial battle armor that gleamed like black chrome. Unlike the crude war leader Vextar, Kexvon was the ultimate Kithrin warrior, intelligent, ruthless, and absolutely convinced of his own superiority. Humans, his voice boomed across all frequencies, each word dripping with contempt. You have interfered with Kithrin expansion for the last time. You are insects who have dared to sting a dragon. Surrender now, and I promise your deaths will be swift rather than the slow agony you deserve. On the bridge of the Liberty, Admiral Giwan Li stood like a statue carved from determination. Around her, the command crew worked with the quiet efficiency that came from years of training and absolute trust in their leader. Communications Officer Yuna Kim couldn't quite hide the nervousness in her hands as she monitored incoming transmissions, while Chief Tactical Officer Soyan Nam ran calculations on her computer, her fingers dancing across displays showing odds that no sane person would accept. Captain Minho Park watched the tactical display with the focused intensity of a chess master facing an impossible position. 200 ships against 12. Any military academy in the galaxy would call it suicide. But Minho had learned something important during his years in space. Sometimes the most impossible odds were exactly when humans did their best work. All ships, Admiral Jiwan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. This is what we trained for. Every simulation, Every exercise, every lesson has brought us to this moment. Remember, we're not just fighting for victory. We're fighting so that innocent people can live free, so that children can grow up without fear, so that bullies like these learn that there are consequences for their actions. The human fleet spread out in a formation that looked almost casual compared to the rigid lines of the Kithran armada. But appearances were deceiving. Every ship was positioned with mathematical precision. Every angle calculated to maximize their limited firepower. Commander Tae-young-oh smiled grimly from his position aboard the stealth ship Ghost. For weeks, his special operations teams had been playing the long game, infiltrating captured Kithran vessels and preparing for exactly this moment. Hidden throughout the enemy fleet were 30 ships that looked Kithran, but were now under complete human control. Phase 1, he whispered into his execute. The Kithran fleet began its advance, moving in the classical hammer-on-Donvel formation that had crushed resistance on 100 worlds. Their massive guns charged up, preparing to unleash a bombardment that would vaporize the human ships in seconds. Then chaos erupted in their ranks. 30 Kithran vessels suddenly opened fire on their own fleet. The ships that Tae-young's teams had captured and converted into remote-controlled weapons struck without warning. Their attacks perfectly coordinated to hit the most vulnerable points in the enemy formation. His fleet? Who dares attack the Grand Fleet? His sensor operators scrambled to understand what was happening. Supreme Leader, it appears that 30% of our own vessels have turned against us. But that's impossible. Our crews are completely loyal. Unless, Kexvan said slowly, his tactical mind beginning to grasp the scope of what the humans had accomplished. There are no crews left aboard those ships. The human counterattack began immediately. Fighter pilot Hyen-jung lead Alpha Squadron in a diving attack that used the confusion in the enemy ranks to punch straight through their defensive lines. His fighters moved like a school of fish, each pilot anticipating the others. Movements with an almost telepathic precision. Blue Squadron, this is Tiger-led, Hyen called out as his fighters screamed between two burning Kithran destroyers. Their command ships, their ability to coordinate. Pilot Seo Kong followed up with Bravo Squadron, their smaller, more agile ships darting through the chaos like deadly butterflies. Where the Kithrans expected brute force, they encountered surgical precision. Every shot was calculated. Every maneuver planned to cause maximum disruption with minimum. But the real masterstroke came from Chief Tactical Officer Suen Nam. For weeks, she had been studying not just Kithran technology, but Kithran psychology. She understood their rigid hierarchy, their paranoia, their tendency to suspect treachery in their own ranks. Initiating psychological warfare protocol, she announced to Admiral Guan, broadcasting fabricated evidence package now. Across the Kithran fleet, commanders suddenly received what appeared to be intercepted communications, evidence that several war leaders were planning to overthrow Supreme War Leader Kexvan and seize control of the Empire for themselves. The evidence was completely fabricated, created by human intelligence specialists who understood exactly which buttons to push. The effect was immediate and devastating. Paranoia, already simmering beneath the surface of the brutal Kithran hierarchy, exploded into open warfare. Ship turned against ship as commanders accused each other of treachery. The Grand Fleet, which moments before had been advancing in perfect formation, began tearing itself apart from within. Impossible, Kexvan snarled, as he watched his mighty armada dissolve into chaos. This is some human trick. Sir, his aide stammered, War Leader Zekran is demanding to know why you're targeting his ships. War Leader Veltar claims you've ordered his execution. The fleet is falling apart. Through it all, the human ships moved like ghosts through the destruction, their weapons picking off crippled enemy vessels with methodical precision. They didn't fight like conquerors seeking glory. They fought like surgeons removing a cancer. Each strike calculated to end the threat with minimum collateral damage. The battle raged for hours. But the outcome was never really in doubt once the Kithrans began fighting each other. By the time the smoke cleared, the Grand Fleet existed only as scattered debris and fleeing survivors. The greatest armada in Kithran history had been destroyed not by superior firepower, but by superior understanding of warfare itself. In the Final confrontation? Captain Minho Park found himself aboard the crippled Worldbreaker, facing Supreme War Leader Kexvan in single combat. The massive alien warrior raised his energy blade, his eyes burning with the fury of a dying empire. "You've destroyed everything," Kexvan roared, swinging the glowing weapon in an arc that would have split a normal human in half. "My fleet. My empire's dreams of conquest. A rightful place as rulers of the galaxy." Minho ducked under the blade and drew his plasma sidearm, but he didn't fire. Instead, he looked up at the towering alien with something that might have been pity. "We didn't destroy anything," he said calmly. "We just showed the galaxy that bullies can be stopped. The innocent people don't have to live in fear. And sometimes, when someone calls for help, the right people answer." Kexvan lunged forward, but age and wounds had slowed him. Minho's shot took him center mass. The supreme war leader of the Kithran Empire fell to the deck of his own flagship, his dreams of conquest dying with him. When the smoke cleared, and the last enemy ship had either fled or surrendered, an eerie quiet settled over the battlefield. The Kithran threat, which had terrorized this region of space for generations, was ended forever. On Zelari Prime, the celebrations lasted for days. Millions of beings poured into the streets, their musical voices raised in songs of gratitude. In joy, elder scientist Kira Vess stood on her observation deck, tears streaming down her face as she watched the human fleet prepare to depart. "Admiral," she said, as Admiral Jiwan Lee appeared on her communication screen. "We may not have found our ancient protectors, but we found something better. Friends who came not because they had to, but because they chose to." Kiwan smiled, and for the first time in days, the expression reached her eyes. "That's what makes us human, Elder Curave.
Ow.
When someone calls for help, we answer. Not because of duty or programming or ancient obligations. We answer because it's the right thing to do." As the human fleet prepared to jump back to hyperspace and continue their exploration mission, they left behind more than just a saved world. They had established humanity's reputation across the galaxy, not as conquerors seeking empire, not as destroyers bringing chaos, but as the species others called when hope seemed lost. Word of the battle spread faster than light itself carried. By traders and travelers to every corner of known space, the story grew in the telling. 12 human ships defeating a fleet of 200. Unknown warriors who fought not for glory, but for justice.
Ow.
Protectors who appeared when needed most and asked for nothing in return. From that day forward, whenever. Desperate civilizations sent distress signals into the void. They hoped not for ancient legends or mythical guardians, but for the return of the humans who had proven that sometimes the greatest strength came not from weapons or numbers, but from the simple decision to do what was right. The age of Kithran terror was over. The age of human protection had begun. The end.